Well, come on in to a Thursday edition of the Yanks Go Yard Podcast. I'm Adam Wanderble alongside Thomas Carolante. The New York Yankees won a baseball game at home that they trailed 7-4 in the 10th, that they trailed 4-0 in the 6th. And yeah, we are going to treat one game like it's the World Series because, God, it felt so good to walk off grand slam the Rays down 3 in the bottom of the 10th. Is everything fixed? Are the Yankees saved? No. There's no way of knowing, but they're in a much better position today than they were yesterday. They've called up Oswaldo Cabrera and Estevan Florial, and Ron Marinaccio found his way back to the roster and immediately was used in a high-leverage situation, which he succeeded in on Wednesday. Shocker of all shockers, it's almost like someone who, when he's active, is your 7th and 8th inning guy, shouldn't be at AAA for no reason. Still working on the whole Clark Schmidt thing. Maybe see you September 1st. Domingo Germán was okay again. Gleyber Torres came alive at the end of this game. Josh Donaldson, of course, the big man with the big swing, bringing the rain. A lot of people who you didn't want to see up in big scenarios came through and were completely acceptable in this one game. That is the season turned around? I don't know. Really tough 4-game set coming up with the Blue Jays, but it would have been a lot tougher if they had been 8 up on the division instead of 10 up, which is where they are now, 10 up on both Tampa and Toronto, with Toronto coming to town for 4. I don't know if the season is saved. I think that Donaldson home run is the biggest swing any Yankee has had all year, all decade, in terms of just changing the feelings, changing the structure since the Raul Ibanez home run. I don't know if the Yankees have had a bigger home run than that. Thomas Carolante, welcome to the podcast. You can find us live on YouTube, 2 o'clock Eastern time, Mondays and Thursdays. If you want to, I mean, you are on the stream right now, so you probably don't have to go there. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Again, if you want to re-listen, but you don't really have to, you specifically, Thomas, because you're on the show, you're now. So you don't have to go find it. But again, hey, if you're bored, if you're on the train, I know you got to commute tonight. Like, that's where the podcast is. Welcome to the podcast. How you feeling? I legitimately don't know if I would have been alive today if not for that home run.
I'm upset because I had enough last night. I didn't experience the home run. I said to myself, I will watch. Because after Rizzo, I was about to turn it off. I said if they didn't score in the bottom of the 8th, I was done. Rizzo hits the home run, and I said, okay, great. I'll watch till the bottom of the 9th. If they do not score, I am not watching them lose in extras. I set a boundary for myself because I had watched enough shitty baseball for the past 2 weeks that I was not going to stay up longer after an hour and 5-minute rain delay to just get my ass kicked again. So I did not experience this cathartic moment with the rest of the more dedicated Yankees fans. I will be the first to say that I guess I am not dedicated, but They brought me to a point and I was fucking pissed. I was talking shit on Donaldson too, because so many ineffective and just let down at bats before that was left me with just like whatever. Pinch hitting Hicks was out of this world crazy. Gleyber's double play ball with the bases loaded after Pete Fairbanks couldn't throw a strike. After coming into the game to face Aaron Judge, infuriating. So I, instead of A, continuing the negative discourse and B, losing my mind, I said to myself, you know what? Just going to go to bed. We'll see what happens in the morning. I wake up at 3 a.m. to get a notification that Josh Donaldson hit a walk-off grand slam. I am happy for the man. I'm happy for Josh Donaldson. He certainly needed something of that magnitude. I would agree this is one of the most impactful swings at the very least of the past 5 years. I wish I got to experience it in real time, but I had to set limitations for myself. Perhaps I went too far, but I was also waking up at 6:30 to come into the office today to have a little bit of fun, and that would have taken me well past my bedtime to get adequate sleep. But
one of my most pleasant losses ever probably was Friday, the Red Sox blown save and walk-off loss, because I had a pretty important dinner. And for the first time in my life, I was like, I'm not checking my phone. I'm not doing it. I will not do it. For Yankees at Fenway, when we look this shitty, I will not do that to myself. So I go the whole dinner. I don't check. I check. They're up 2-1 in the top of the 5th. And I go, that's nice, but that's not a real lead. I checked again in the top of the 7th. Still 2-1. And I checked in the bottom of the 10th with the winning run on third base. And I went, great. They're about to lose, but I experienced absolutely none of it. And I moved on. And then they won the next day. I experienced that game in the same way. The kind of for the game too. I go, I'm not doing it again. They're going to get swept. I'm not doing it again. And they won. And guess what? It felt just as good. I didn't need to that whole awful. The more Fenway games I can avoid, the better.
Yeah. I think not seeing that moment, maybe, I don't know. Am I exaggerating here? I think some Yankees fans might be a bit delusional right now, perhaps convinced that this swing is going to turn around the season, perhaps convinced that this is the start of a new run for the Yankees. And maybe you're right. Maybe your magical instincts and your feels are correct. However, after what I watched and even seeing the replays and having a great time, I know there was backstory, but Josh Donaldson's uncle having a heart attack, being in the hospital was a very great moment for him. I don't know how this changes the calculus of the current iteration of the Yankees. I think the roster moves were positive, but they're not going to move the needle until they actually tangibly move the needle. The concerns here are real. You lose Garrett Cole start and an Nestor Cortez start against the Rays. And I'm not bashing the Rays, but you look at the Rays lineup. They're without Kevin Kiermaier, who's a valuable player for them. Might not be super, super valuable to any other team, but he's valuable to them. They're without Wander Franco. They're without Manny Margot. They're without Mike Zunino. So this team, the manner in which the Yankees have been playing against inferior opponents, the Red Sox are an inferior opponent, folks. I know that the rivalry, it doesn't really matter who's bad and who's not, that it's always going to be played on the same level field. But having that followed up with this Rays series, who the Rays are competitive, but they're not that good. I don't see how this changes anything. The Yankees were getting punked by Corey Kluber until Gleyber Torres finally ran into a pitch that kind of changed the way the game was going. You look at the rest of this Rays lineup: Francisco Mejia, solid. G-Man Choi, solid. Brandon Lau, below average, barely average. Taylor Walls, awful. Yandy Diaz, admittedly having a good year, but not really hitting for power. Randy Arozarena, largely having an unimpressive year until he kind of turned it around recently. Harold Ramirez, somebody else who's kind of kicking ass inexplicably. So look, it's a solid team, but the Yankees are supposed to have better players. They're supposed to have better starters. They're supposed to have better depth. And it was shown to them in this series, despite capping this with an exclamation point, keeping the season alive, keeping the vibes not plummeting to rock bottom, that there's still a ton of work that needs to be done here, whether it's figuring out the identity, whether it's putting the right pieces in the right places. The Yankees should have never been in this position in this game. They should have never been in this position in the previous 2 games. They shouldn't have gotten shut out by the Red Sox in 2 hours and 10 minutes. So lots of things here that are still very problematic to me, that don't have me riding high despite one win. Yes, having the 10-game cushion is great, but all it's going to take is losing 3 out of 4 to the Jays right now to make it single digits with 1 week left in August. And now you're playing catch up and you're worried and looking over your back constantly. I don't like what the Yankees did with August. I think it set a poor tone. And the fact that you theoretically needed a moment such as this, a walk-off grand slam down 3 in extra innings because you're underperforming for the first 9 innings, speaks volumes to the hole that I think management kind of dug this team into.
Without last night's game, though, they are hopeless.
Yeah,
like that is the end. Yeah, yep. The season was over for like 8 minutes last night.
Yeah,
after Chapman allowed the 3-run double, the season was over. And I know you can. People are going to laugh, and people are going to. Non-Yankee fans are going to clip this. Non-Yankee fans are so fun because they mock what do they mock you, right? They say you say 27 rings, right? They're like, oh, all you care about is the past, 27 rings. But then when a Yankee fan is like, wow, I really hope we don't gag a 17-game lead over the Blue Jays in the AL East, They're like, what are you crying for? You guys have 27 world championships. What are you talking about? You won one in 2009. So you're both not allowed to be proud of your franchise's history, and you're also not allowed to complain about the present because of your history. So like your life will be a better place once you just realize they don't care what you think. They don't care what you think at all. They whatever you think, they believe the opposite. However you behave, they think you're behaving wrong because they hate you and they hate what you stand for. So that's it, and that's all. But if the New York Yankees had watched their lead on July 9th, the day when they got walked off by the Red Sox, where they took a lead in extras on the road and then lost it in the bottom of the inning on the road, got walked off by Alex Verdugo, hopefully not so coincidentally, a very similar game to last night's game, similar dire circumstances, 1 run larger on the comeback. Hopefully those two serve as bookends of a horrible streak. There's really no discernible reason to think that they will. And I'm not going to tell you like, yeah, the series against the Jays is going to kick ass because we came from the dead in extra innings last night. I could never tell you that. They're short 1 Clay Holmes and 1 Michael King in the bullpen. They're short 1 Giancarlo Stanton and 1 Matt Carpenter in the lineup. These call-ups are not going to, I love Oswaldo Cabrera. I'm pretty confident that Giancarlo Stanton in his prime would be a better addition to this lineup than Oswaldo Cabrera. But there are tangible reasons why they're struggling. But that said, they were, on July 9th, they were 17 up on Toronto, and they were many up on many other teams. I think their overall lead in the East was 15 at that point on Tampa, and then Boston was right there. Either way, 17 up on Toronto. And if they'd lost yesterday, it would have been 9 entering a 4-game set in the Bronx, entering that set in the middle of a 2-12 stretch with all the momentum flowing in the wrong direction. And you were starting games going, how are we going to blow this one? What kind of loss is it going to be tonight? Are the bats going to be dead silent? That's what we did the last 3 in a row. We had qualities. The Yankees have lost their last 6 quality starts, an unbelievable streak. And we just were coming off 3 in a row of those, of being shut out in 2 hours at Fenway, being shut out in just over 2.5 hours on Monday against the Rays, and then being, 3-1 game. They didn't have an RBI in the Tuesday loss. It was an error on a dribbler to third by Miguel Andujar, who came back up, had to go back down. That wasn't working. So we're in the middle of the offensive doldrums. And if they lose that game, they're going to be 9 up on Toronto with no end in sight to the slide. And they're also going to be 8 up on Tampa, who all of a sudden had passed Toronto because Toronto was struggling. Toronto has been struggling for like a month now, too. They've been a 500 team, essentially, a little under 500 since that July 9th date. If the Yankees were playing average baseball, they would have expanded their lead to 18 or 19, not watched it fall to 10. That cushion of the 10-game lead was giving the Yankees all this leeway to say, let's just hang out. Not that they weren't trying, because that's a bullshit excuse. They were trying to win baseball games and pressing like crazy because they were starting to feel it spiral out of control. But the reason Giancarlo Stanton was so slow to return it on the IL was because they were taking it easy. The reason Luis Severino's on the 60-day IL is because they were taking it easy. The reason Jordan Montgomery was traded for Harrison Bader, who can't come back until mid-September, is because the Yankees didn't think they needed to do anything until mid-September, and definitely didn't think that they needed Jordan Montgomery, who's 3-0 in 3 starts with an 0.64 ERA, in order to coast until September. Everything the Yankees were doing on the field was telling you they couldn't afford to coast, and that they didn't know how to coast, and that they were pressing while they were trying to coast. So watching that lead get halved when it should have gotten expanded, plus the drama of the Chapman moment, the strikeout with the bases loaded, the first time he's faced control problems since coming back, the 0-2 pitch to Francisco Mejia, and the 3-run double. If they lose that game 7-4 in extras, that's not just another loss. That is the end. They're losing 3 out of 4 to Toronto at worst. They're probably getting 4 games swept by Toronto, and then suddenly it's maybe 4 up on the Rays, 5 up on Toronto, and DeGrom and Scherzer come in for the Mets series. I'm not saying that the Toronto series is going to go great now. I'm not saying they're splitting it. All we're saying is that they do have a 10-game lead. That's a real cushion. It would have felt so much dicier at 8. I promise you that. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying the Yankees saved their season. I'm just saying it would have been over had they lost the way they lost yesterday. And it was over for 8 minutes. And again, that doesn't mean they absolutely would have blown the division lead. It just means that the season would not have ended the way that you wanted it to if they had lost last night the way they almost lost last night's game.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that the energy surrounding this team has been terrible. It's, once again, it's been 2021 vibes. So they needed something of tremendous magnitude as a walk-off grand slam. A walk-off grand slam down 3 is just about as big as you could potentially turn it around if you have any interest in turning it around. So once again, we'll see what they do with this momentum, because how many times this year have we seen, teams like the Red Sox just squander momentum? They whooped our ass. They came back after going down 0-2 in that first 4-game series at Fenway. They scratched and clawed, and they embarrassed us those next 2 games, and then they go to Tampa and they lose 4 straight. So it all depends on what you do with the momentum. Am I fully convinced that the Yankees are going to parlay this momentum with some sort of positive outcome? No. Am I rooting for it? Absolutely. Root for it every day. My comments might be negative, but that's just because what I'm watching is not instilling any confidence in me, and it's making me feel worse watching non-competitive at-bats, watching Aaron Hicks helicopter his way into an error in center field. The list goes on and on. It's been very boring. You see the beat writers tweeting. This is not just fans. These are beat writers at the stadium saying, this is a boring brand of baseball. Yeah, because nobody really wants to play baseball, it seems, on this team. It's very bizarre when you look at who's playing, how they're playing, and what the outcome is. Because I said it last night, I've watched a ton of baseball in my life. I am 32 years old. I've had MLB TV for the past 5 to 8 years. I've been watching Yankees and Mets growing up my entire life. I have never seen a team with this much talent play like a rebuilding organization at times. And I understand there are peaks and valleys in any given season. Teams, we watched, for example, like the Astros last year. I think the Orioles went to Houston last year and swept the Astros in 4 games. Yeah. And the Astros scored they maybe scored 6 total runs all series.
Astros just got swept by the A's this year too, a couple weeks
ago. Crazy things happen, and it's understandable. Crazy things happening for a month. Crazy, play that you would never expect from the supposed best team in baseball, then turning into a bottom 5 team for an entire month, regardless of injuries. Yes, injuries have hurt this roster. Absolutely. There is no question about it. But you mean to tell me that guys like Andrew Benintendi, like Gleyber Torres, like Josh Donaldson, I don't know. How can none of those guys, with the exception of Gleyber's big hit last night, how can none of those guys and Donaldson last night positively contribute? There's been no consistent positive production. Nobody has been able to step up. And to me, that's a problem with the roster construction. Your roster is supposed to be built to absorb 1 or 2 costly injuries. Or else what are you doing? You're heading into a season saying, hey, you know what? Looks like everybody has to stay healthy, or else that's it. So we'll just figure it out after that. If you're doing that, then that means there's not enough depth. Then that means you don't rely on the other starters that you have. The Yankees can't rely on hitters 2 through 4 to determine or 1 through 3 to determine their fate every single night. There's no sustainability there. For a team as unlucky with injuries as the Yankees have been for 5 years now, I don't even know how it's a thought in the team's brain to even consider potentially being low on talent or low on players that could step in for injury. And that's what makes these roster moves, let's get into them now, even more frustrating, or the delay of roster moves even more frustrating. Do I love Oswaldo Cabrera and Esteban Florial being here? Absolutely. Could these moves have been made 3 weeks ago? Also, absolutely. Players have been slumping for weeks into July. We talked about at the All-Star break how this team badly needed the All-Star break to get a rest because so many people were struggling and not really on track. They get the All-Star break and the problems persist for another 10 days. And then you're sitting there and you think you make reinforcements at the deadline, and then you fuck up by taking all the shine off the deadline with the Jordan Montgomery trade, and you don't think that maybe a re-injection of youth could maybe fix that. So now we have Ron Marinaccio is back, who should have never been gone, as he further proved again last night. You have Esteban Florial manning center field, which I don't even care if he strikes out every at bat. I'd rather him in center field than Aaron Hicks. And you have Oswaldo Cabrera, who can bounce around the infield, can play second, shortstop, and third. He started at third last night, responded to his roll call in tremendous fashion, talked to the media before the game. Happy to be here. I want more guys that are happy to be here. I want more guys that enjoy the moment and the spectacle, and have some sort of feeling of belonging and some feeling of fun. Of, oh my God, I'm playing baseball for the New York Yankees. This is sick. Want more of that. It just seems like more of it's dejected. The criticism is getting in their head. The fans booing them or getting them in their head. Like, what was Hicks's comments the other day? He got like upset about being booed. Yeah. After saying, if I'm that guy in the lineup, then so be it. If I'm not, then it is what it is. Like, what is that?
That means nothing.
After the guy who said, we want to have some fuck you this year, that's going to be your response in August when the team is sliding. Now you're just going to be like, yeah, actually, I mean, I guess it really doesn't matter at this point. So, whatever happens, happens. Just absolutely insane to me. So there's always been some, like, for example, Josh Donaldson was this team's agitator for the first 2 months of the season, and then he stopped being the agitator after the Tim Anderson incident. So we lost that edge, or whatever that edge was. It's no longer there. He's shelled up. He's no longer talking shit, whether it was because of that incident or whether it's because he's been miserable for the last 2.5 months of play. We don't have that edge anymore. And then there's injuries. Garrett Cole is pleading for a spark. Your highest paid player is pleading for a spark. That means the spark is long overdue, which again, further proves the front office has no pulse on the clubhouse, which once again, I'm excited about these roster moves. Should have came a lot earlier, could have prevented this slide from occurring longer.
I'm excited. There's an immediate impact yesterday, not necessarily in the box score, but well beyond it. Cabrera talking to the media saying this is the best day of his life. He's got endless swagger in the post game. He's got this dangling single Barry Bonds earring from his left ear. His whole family is there. He almost blows the first play of his career, like an easy pop up to third that he somehow loses and gets back. He does blow the first throw of his career. He throws into the dirt and has Domingo Germán to scoop it. It doesn't go smoothly, right? But the Yankees have enough of a lead. And I know all of this contradicts, oh, the season's over if the lead gets down to 8. But you call the kids up who can spark you when you're up 8, 9, 10. You don't do it when you're up 5 and the Jays have already taken 3 from you and you're trying to avert a sweep. You do it. I would have done it at the start of this Rays series after the Red Sox lost, but 2 days later, not the worst thing in the world. Now, Cabrera doesn't even have a game that really matters. He gets under a pitch in his first at-bat and almost pops a 2-0 fastball over the wall, but doesn't, strikes out twice, goes 0 for 4, and looks a little bit shaky on defense. He's more of a shortstop second baseman than he is a third baseman, even though he plays all 3. It is what it is. Florial doesn't do anything at the plate. He makes a great shoestring catch to get Ron Marinaccio out of a tough inning. Marinaccio obviously has an immediate impact. He's in the mid-20s in pitch count, and he covers the 7th and 8th inning. After Lou Trevino struggles a little bit, he pitches basically the most important innings of the game. Scott Efros with a great 9th. Aroldis Chapman comes in with a guy on second. The Manfred runner, for whatever reason, I don't want him ever pitching extra innings ever in my life for the rest of time. But Marinaccio, so after one game of the new era, Marinaccio is the only one who really did a job because he's someone who's been here before and they basically just reinserted him into a role he's already played and he succeeded again. Florial makes one great defensive play, doesn't hit and gets pinch hit for eventually, but I super don't care because that spot can't be Aaron Hicks anymore. So I want to give whoever is being called up a long leash. Cabrera should be starting several times a week. I would have said prior to the end of last night's game that he should give Donaldson a breather every once in a while. Now I think Donaldson we could let that guy live. I give him 3 weeks of immunity. I hope. That was such a huge hit. Huge. I still do want Cabrera in 3 to 4 times a week. Even if he's not playing, though, he provides significant intangibles. Even if Florial's not hitting, he cannot be worse than Hicks, who, according to win probability added, is the worst player in baseball. If you're adding him to your roster, he is more likely on a day-to-day basis to give you a loss, to influence a loss than anybody else. So Florial is going to have a few weeks here where he should be starting a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Now that leaves Aaron Hicks as the first guy off the bench. Last night, he's pinch hitting for IKF. I would never have done that in a million years. You just bunt IKF if you don't want him hitting that badly. But apparently we need to see Aaron Hicks up again in leading off the bottom of the ninth in a big situation. Great. Florial has a genuine opportunity. Cabrera, I'm not sure how often he plays, but again, the Marvin Gonzalez roster spot that gets 7 at-bats in a month and a half and goes 0 for 7 is just, it's dead. It's a hole. It doesn't get used. Cabrera's hero is apparently Marvin Gonzalez. He was somebody he watched growing up. That has to be fake. That can't be real. But assuming that is real and he really was excited to be on the same team as Marvin Gonzalez, it's nice that Marvin didn't lose his roster spot. It's also nice that DJ is not injured enough to go on the IL yet, apparently. I'm not calling that one a finished product. I can't guarantee he's going to play tonight until he plays tonight, even though he pinch hit yesterday. But you've now got a guy whose energy has helped prop up a roster all year, and you've got a guy filling an absolute black hole. Whether that black hole is Miguel Andujar and his 5 singles and 25 at-bats, or it's Aaron Hicks, the worst player in terms of WPA.
Whoa, folks.
Welcome back. We got disconnected, but we're back. We're live. Anyway, whether
Drunk, do you hear us?
Drunk, are you still here? Whether you're replacing Hicks or Florial, whether you're replacing Hicks with Florial or Andujar with Florial, you're replacing 2 dead zones with the possibility.
We're back again.
Now we're on opposite sides.
I like it.
This is very interesting. This is what's going to be called a good file. All of you people who like to listen to files are going to be like, this podcast was so cohesive. They only said the same thing 3 times in a row and then paused and then went offline. Only 3 times did that happen. Either way, the Yankees went 75% of the way as far as they could have gone with these call-ups. They could have called up Oswald Peraza. They still have not done that. There's another button to press if they need to do it again. But right now, these are call-ups that have 100% approval rating. Clay Holmes, whether the injury is real or not, is on the IL with a back injury, laughing as people ask him to recount a story of why his back is hurt. Additionally, he was replaced by somebody who immediately slots into the back end of the bullpen. Hicks and Florial, easy. And Andujar and Florial, also easy. And Oswaldo Cabrera, instant energy injection. There's whether these are half measures, whether they should have been done weeks ago, that's up for debate, but there is no arguing that they are valuable maneuvers. And again, one more play left in the playbook if you want to do something else.
Yeah, I don't know how. I just don't know how you don't do it earlier. That's really I don't know how we can debate that, but it's crazy to me. It's been so obvious. It's been so obvious that long stretches of poor play have plagued this team, right? 2020, even though it was a shortened season, they never really had a stretch where you're like, wow, they look good. Like this is great. It was always treading water. 2021 was absolutely bad all around, start to finish, bad. A couple of good 2-week stretches in there that didn't turn things around or didn't play a big enough role to turn things around. And now you have such a good first 3 months and you're approaching a second half where it's important to start it off fast. It's important to set the tone with the trade deadline, with some sort of good performance out of the break because you know the schedule got altered and you knew you were facing the Astros. And maybe these players don't move the needle, but you know at least at that point you're trying something. Marvin Gonzalez getting no at-bats for what? Since the end, it's 9 at-bats since July 24th, and his last hit came on July 6th, and it was off a position player in the blowout against the Pirates.
Yeah.
What are we doing with that? Are you saving Marvin Gonzalez for the postseason? If so, how do you think he's going to be ready for the postseason if you're not playing him? And B, why are you not telling people this? I don't even know what to say because it's fucking crazy to me. It's all just so crazy to me. You have an option in Oswald Peraza, who is there, who might not be blowing the doors off at AAA. But guess what? Once again, not every prospect's journey is fully linear. It just isn't. Michael Harris just got an 8-year, $72 million extension from the Atlanta Braves after playing. Did he even play any games at AAA? Honestly, did he? Think he might have played. He mostly had AA experience before
he got called up straight from AA.
Yeah, he got called up straight from AA, and now he has a fucking contract extension that sets him for life. There's no foresight with the Yankees with this. They wait forever to call up their prospects, and at that point, the pressure is heaped on these prospects. There's already enough pressure being a Yankees prospect, right? There is the pedigree of playing for the Yankees, and there's always the pedigree of taking over the next position. This instance, it's shortstop. In previous years, it's been starting pitchers. Oh man, the Yankees have had trouble, getting starting pitchers to, come through the system and be homegrown talents. Like, who's going to be next? There is always that inherent pressure of being in New York and then taking over a Legends position or taking over a position that has had a dearth of talent for so long that needs an infusion that could reawaken New York and reawaken the fan base. So to add more pressure onto prospects and bring it to the point where you're like, all right, well, we're 8-17 since the All-Star break and we're starting a crater. So, let's hope 3 promotions, let's hope these guys are going to turn it around for us. No, call them up so the setting for them is at least a little bit more favorable than, hey, we're approaching rock bottom, so let's see if something will work. Call them up when the Yankees are firing on all cylinders, and inserting them into the 7th or 8th hole is going to be beneficial and relaxing and fun instead of, oh, we got to put you in the 6th hole and you're going to need to get hits now. So I just don't agree with any of their decision-making on that front. I don't understand why this bizarre veteran-heavy approach always reigns supreme when it's clear that you don't need this many veterans in the room. In fact, this many veterans in the room might be not conducive to the environment that you're creating. You have too many older players in the room who have different, are at different points in their career. And I don't even know, maybe some are paid and they're fine with being what they are. Maybe some are hellbent on winning a championship. You learned about the potential disconnect between Brett Gardner and Garrett Cole last year, which was weird. We still don't know if it's true, but there are differences with veterans. There's no hierarchy to me in this locker room. Aaron Judge, the de facto captain, sure, but to me, does Garrett Cole carry any presence to you? Does Giancarlo Stanton carry an overwhelming presence to you? I think if we had younger DJ LeMahieu, all these guys are kind of peers. And there's no oh, this is the top dog. And then, here's a bunch of other guys influencing other players. It just doesn't really feel like it's like that. And it's because there's not many young players on this team. And it's because there is really no order. It's just, we have these players. These are the veterans that are here. And this is what we're going with. And this is our formula. So we're going to see it through. That's my issue with the Yankees. It's always, here's the formula, and we can't deviate from this formula, even though if we're watching it fail over and over again. So yeah, for example, to me, not getting rid of a Hicks, not trading Glaber when his value was the highest, not figuring out a way to find somebody to take Josh Donaldson's money, not doing one of those deals at the trade deadline is insane to me. And then offloading Jordan Montgomery, who was not only a regular season asset, we can discuss postseason asset all we want, was not only a regular season asset and helped lengthen this pitching staff and save the bullpen, but he was also beloved by a number of his peers. So the fact that the Yankees still have not noticed that this is not the way to do business and this is not the way to win a championship, while you have, for example, the Braves doing what they're doing. We've mentioned that ad nauseum at this point, so I won't get into it. How about the Astros, who lost Carlos Correa and said, yeah, you know what? We got Jeremy Pena, so that'll be fine. We'll be okay. How about the Dodgers, who gave a number of their top prospects opportunities this year, whether the opportunity necessarily called for it or not? Ryan Pepiot has started 6 or 7 games for the Dodgers. Yes, that was kind of necessary because of injuries to the rotation, but Miguel Vargas came up when he didn't exactly need to come up. James Outman came up when they had outfield depth to kind of make it work, but they just wanted to give guys another chance and give them some MLB experience because you never know what can happen down the stretch. You never know if you're going to need these guys. So bring them up sooner, give them a taste of what's going to come, and put them in a favorable situation so they're not shell-shocked every time that they come up. And I just don't understand this roster construction, and I'll never understand the lack of deviating from any sort of plan, and that's what frustrates me with Brian Cashman the most. On a positive note, though, because I forgot to mention it earlier, Scott Efros, I didn't trash that deadline deal. I was just like, are you sure that this is something that is going to kind of replace the status quo that we had that was really good? Seems like it is. Mm-hmm. Scott kicking ass, showing that emotion, getting out of big spots, called upon fucking immediately, and is doing the job. So those are more guys that I want. That's the energy that I want. And I just would like some sort of variation when you see things are going wrong for 5+ weeks. I don't know if I'm fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's like he's the Yankees Alex Vesia.
Yeah,
Ross, we love it. I mean, who's the clubhouse leader of the Yankees here? Like, it's tough to tell because, like, I think they imported Josh Donaldson to be that guy, but then he had some controversy surrounding his name at the end of May and disappeared for a few weeks. Hit the IL, and when he came back, said he wished the Yankees had his back more. That poisoned the well a little bit. It feels like that guy probably wasn't in control of the message, but last night, hugging Glaber, putting his head in his chest, saying, "We're back," does kind of feel like he might be that guy to a certain extent. I mean, LeMahieu's going to do it silently. Judge is going to do it a little louder than LeMahieu, but still pretty silently. It's either somebody all brand new like Donaldson, or it's like Garrett Cole, or, you know, the rotation as a whole, Tyone and Montgomery. Before he was down, would we be down for a full rebuild of the Yankees roster? I mean, absolutely not. They're you know, a 73 win team at this point. They've collapsed for a few weeks now, but a couple of people got to go. A couple of tangible changes can be made. I wouldn't call deleting if Judge leaves. No, I don't want to go through a full rebuild in that instance either. They are too good and too rich and too valuable to ever have to do something like that. That's why it makes me mad when Red Sox fans are always touting like, yes, now's it. Oh, yeah, let's fail. Let's do a teardown. Let's get the number 7 pick because that's always a home run. It's always so easy to, like, that's no MLB draft slot is sacred. You're not drafting, you know, Zion Williamson 1-1. You might get lucky at 28. Mike Trout's going at the bottom of the first round. Like, I'm always trying to compete if I have the Yankees payroll. If I don't, then yeah, I'm happy to execute a full rebuild. But if I have the Yankees payroll, I'm trying to call up some prospects and patch holes next year. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
In terms of when these guys should have been called up, I do think it's more, you know, I don't really need to use Oswaldo Cabrera when they're riding the wave, when they're at their hottest. I don't really need to promote him in the middle of June. I like using these guys as spark plugs every so often. I would have made the move probably a week ago. I would have had him join him on the road trip, get acclimated, tough surroundings, come back to Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
Have your, you know, roll call thing ready. Florial's obviously been here already. That's why that was somewhat underwhelming. It's like, why haven't we just tried that? I mean, I don't know. And now we're doing it. You know, that was an easy one. That should have been. Florial was up at like the end of May. I don't even know why he had to go down at that point. Like, you know what Tim LaCastro is? He's a guy who comes up in September because he's a pinch runner, but he's not somebody who's going to hit over 170. He's not somebody who's going to post an OPS plus of over 75. Like, you call him up when rosters expand. You don't need to use a roster spot on him. You could just use that on Florial, have him play 2 or 3 times a week. I understand you want him to play more than that. His development is finally hitting this peak. Development's not linear. He's making progress. You don't want to stunt that by taking him out of the lineup. Good. Yeah. Then play him. Stunt Aaron Hicks. Aaron Hicks doesn't need to play. Stunt that guy. He's already made his money. He's already getting paid. And now your final point that the Yankees would benefit from not having had the August trade deadline eliminated, it's now gone. There's no more helping yourself unless veterans are getting DFA'd, right? Your only options for improvement are calling up a Cabrera and Florial and Marinaccio, or finding ways to send guys who are struggling to the injured list, or waiting on waiver claims, waiting on other players to get DFA'd. But those people by default are 10% difference makers, 5% difference makers. It's players who are getting cut from other competitive teams and other teams that are flatlining. Why did the A's slice Elvis Andrus? I'm not sure. Elvis Andrus is a fine backup shortstop. His numbers are actually better than IKF's this year. He's got a 97 OPS plus. If that had been their stopgap, sure. But he's not in his prime. He's way past his prime, and he never hit for power even in his prime. You think Elvis Andrus is a better player than he is. He's got about 2,000 hits. It's kind of nuts. He was an all-star as a very young man. He's somebody who I viewed as a potential future Hall of Famer, but even in his younger days, he was just hitting singles, and his OPS pluses were like 70, 75, 80. Not a great baseball player, sort of a dying breed. That's the kind of name that gets floated out there now, who's available in the middle of August because he's getting cut. Bradley Zimmer just went to the Phillies. You want Bradley Zimmer in the outfield? I'd rather invest on Florial. Bradley Zimmer already got cut by the Blue Jays because he can't hit. And he's fast, but he's got no bat. So these are the type of upgrades you're able to get on the waiver wire now. 3%, 4% upgrades at best, but odds are low that they're even going to help you more than some anonymous name in your minor league system. The August waiver trade deadline used to be real. You used to be able to get Justin Verlander at that thing. You used to be able to watch teams fall out of the race over the couple of week period between July and August and go, I'm plundering that dude. And there are teams that the Yankees could be picking apart right now and vulturing that they do not have the ability to touch.
Yeah. And that Justin Verlander deal ruined it all. That was correct me if I'm wrong. That was the last waiver deal ever done.
Great question. I actually.
Oh no, I'm sorry. It was banned after 2018 because I think they saw the impact of the Verlander deal. So, Al Avila, folks, fired as the Tigers GM 2 weeks ago. Last week, should have been fired years ago. Don't know how he was allowed to see things go through. One of these black marks on his resume is trading Verlander. Understandably, you didn't need him, right? Team sucks, paying Verlander a ton of money. Verlander's over the hill, whatever. You trade Verlander to a contender for pitcher Franklin Perez, outfielder Daz Cameron, and catcher Jake Rogers to the Astros, who were in the middle of contention that year. You completely tipped the scales of that playoff race of the AL for the next 5 years, and then none of those prospects pan out for you, not a single one.
Nope.
So you went 0 for 3 in the trade. You completely altered the American League picture from a regular season and postseason standpoint. And I think that's why MLB ended up banning it. But in this situation, I think, and I don't know if this is crazy, I think the deadline should be mid-August. And this is not any sort of revisionist history here. I'm not sitting here looking like, oh man, if the Yankees could have waited 2 weeks, they could have had more of a pulse, more of a gauge on what's going on. The fact of the matter is that the beginning, you're 15 games into the second half at that point. You don't know if you're going to contend. Yeah, you can be ballsy and buy like the Braves did last year, but they mostly went bargain shopping. You could be ballsy like the Padres and buy and still not really know what's going to happen because they don't know what's going to happen on a yearly basis, apparently, in San Diego. But to sit there and think you at, what's your record at that point? Maybe you're like 52 and you may be 53 and 53. Like this is when the deadline is. At this point, looking at the standings, like the Giants, who were unsure if they should sell or not, ended up not selling. And now they're probably looking at the situation and they're like, wait a second, should we have sold? Because now we're 59 and 58. We are, 4 games back of a wild card spot, and they're fighting against teams that are much better than them. Cardinals, Braves, Phillies, and Padres and Brewers. So maybe that convinces them to trade a Jock Peterson or to trade a Carlos Rodon. You look in the AL too, I don't know if there necessarily would have been more sellers in the AL. But look at the Red Sox. The Red Sox thought they were apparently in an okay position. Now they're just playing 500 ball. Yeah, they're 2 games back of a wild card spot, but are the Red Sox really going to get there? Could they have benefited by trading, JD Martinez, Nathan Eovaldi, guys that would have, that would have tipped the scales. Obviously, the Yankees would not have been in the running for either, anybody on the Red Sox, but you look at a team like the Rockies too, maybe the Rockies would have been convinced of trading Jose Iglesias at that point. Okay. Maybe the Rangers would have been more convinced of trading Martin Perez. the Rangers were at the deadline. They were bad, but they weren't like egregiously far. I think they were like 7 or 8 games back of a wild card spot, which that can flip in 2 weeks, guys. All that takes is one team suffering 2 bad injuries and then going on a slide. I'm not saying that it's likely and it's possible, but it happens. Do the Tigers revisit their deadline? The Tigers were supposed to be open for business at this trade deadline, and they ended up trading Robbie Grossman and Michael Fulmer, and that was it. They had a bunch of other assets on this team. Maybe at this point, maybe last week they're like, okay, let's trade Andrew Chafin. We have no use for him next year. We're clearly not, going to make any noise. We're not going to make any noise down the stretch, and our outlook for the beginning of next year is bad. And there are plenty of other examples out there, but now that the waiver deadline is banned, even though the Yankees never really did momentous work on it, it makes you have to be doubly aggressive at the actual trade deadline if you want to make those impact moves and set yourself up for success in September. So I think that we need to, there needs to be a happy medium that's reached here. Maybe second week of August, we're talking trade deadline. That gives you 6 or 7 weeks until the season ends. I think that that's fair. I don't think that's going to, tip any of the scales in a much more crazy fashion. Just gives teams a longer, and even teams that are like in contention at the trade deadline that are like fringe, are like, hey, should we buy a lot here? Like, are we fully like, we could use like another week of play. Maybe you have a soft 7 games on the schedule. It's like, let's see how, the group of guys can build off of these games and get themselves in a better position. So I don't know. Now that the waiver deadline's been gone for now, this is the 3rd year or 4th year. 2020 didn't count because there was only one really. Deadline. So 2019, 2021, and 2022, it's gone. Something feels empty. Something needs to be fixed.
Imagine Rodon too being on the market. I mean, that would have been crazy. Another incredible target for Brian Cashman to be tricked into thinking he was acquiring when he traded Jordan Montgomery. That would have been a perfect extra pitcher for Brian Cashman to be lied to about acquiring right at the deadline, giving up some very important pitching depth. Count on us to be cynical on a podcast where like we should just be celebrating this singular Josh Donaldson game. I very much understood last night people who are like, you just won your freaking World Series, celebrating you won the World Series in August. I was like, yes, it truly feels like I escaped hell. Like I will celebrate today like I won the World Series in August. Yes, that's what I'll do. I know full well I didn't. I know this could go badly. I'm well aware the season's not over. I'm well aware of the way things were trending 9 minutes ago and also this morning and also last night while I was watching the game. I know. Not going to get blindsided by it. This team's been as bad as they've ever been since the All-Star break and pretty boring for the 2 weeks prior to the All-Star break as well. And we're trailing we're all these comeback wins in the like 2 or 3 weeks before that. So they really haven't been solidified as anything resembling a dominant contender since the middle of June, even like that series with the Rays where they were losing in every single game and fought back to win 2. There were moments where they lost a really dull game on the road to Pittsburgh that was kind of like, why do we look so flat? And then it just got flatter, and then they were competing to an embarrassing degree. So yeah, it did feel like winning the World Series last night. And that's how it should feel. You should feel that exhale when you have a massive regular season win like this. However, that one wasn't even an exaggeration. That genuinely takes the anvil off this team's back. I don't know if they're going to be able to pick up where they left off. I really hope they are. But either way, regardless, that gives you something to build on, even if they struggle tonight, to say, remember how we felt when we escaped hell 2 days prior. It's got them something tangible they can build on with this current roster that isn't the incomplete, like, it's a walk-off memory that doesn't involve Giancarlo Stanton and Matt Carpenter and those guys who aren't here anymore. It's a very modern version of this with a roster that has Cabrera and Florial on it. It's all you can hope for. That is it for this edition of the Yanks Go Yard podcast. Make sure to find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Drop us a 5-star review along with the mailbag question. We will be more than happy to answer it. We're also going to be live on YouTube and Twitter, 2 o'clock Eastern, Mondays and Thursdays. And going forward, if there's a playoff game that requires us to go live, we're happy to do it. Hopefully the Yankees keep pressing, keep the good foot on the gas, and stay hot. Until next time, I'm Adam Weiner. You can find me on Twitter at Adam Weiner. It's written right down there. Thomas Carinante. If people aren't watching and rocking with the visuals, where can the people find you?
At Tommy's_takes. You can also talk to us on the official Yanks Go Yard Twitter account at Yanks Go Yard FS. Head on over to yanksgoyard.com. I'll tell you every time at the end of this podcast. We got a ton of content there. Adam's got interesting take on who else should be called up after these roster moves. Remember, folks, we have September roster expansion going up 2 spots, 3 spots, 2 spots.
2. Yeah, I got
2 spots. 2 more people there's room for. I know people are coming back from injuries and whatnot, but another opportunity to inject some life in this lineup. Pretty interesting to consider. So there's a ton of content there for you to read, pique your interest. And now we're gearing up for the Jays, everyone. 4-game series. Can't shit the bed here because this is the direct competition. This is going to define the rest of the stretch. And then you have DeGrom, Scherzer next week. So saying a prayer, reach out to us if you want. We're happy to talk, both on Twitter and here next week. We'll talk to you next Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern, live on YouTube, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Correct. Hey, the Mets are not going to skip DeGrom, Scherzer. Even if they could, they won't. So be prepared. This stays tough. Tough schedule, injured team, typical summer doldrums, huge grand slam. See you on Monday.